All right, happy Monday to you. I'm Fox 26 meteorologist Ramisha Shade. It has been a really hectic and busy weekend for the folks across Florida. Of course, back in July 8th to be exact, we were hit by Category 1 Hurricane Beryl here at Houston with 80-mile-per-hour winds. And of course, this morning, right around 7 a.m., we had another hurricane that made landfall. It was another Gulf Coast landfall, this time around the Big Bend of Florida. And of course, this one was Hurricane Debby. So I'm closely tracking the tropics. We've got another system that could form and push into the Gulf over the next week or so. So a lot to talk about. First, let's get to what happened this morning. Of course, Debby made landfall as a Category 1 80-mile-per-hour hurricane right around Steinhatchee, Florida, with those winds, like I said, right around 80 miles per hour, and also it produced a ton of rainfall. In fact, over 16 inches of rain has already fallen over parts of Florida. So Debby will slow down and dump a ton of rainfall over a big portion of the southeastern U.S. In particular, parts of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida continues to get inundated by some heavy rain as well. So let's talk about what we've had so far for this hurricane season, and it has been an active one so far. Of course, we are officially now into typically what is the busiest part of hurricane season, August and September, but even back in July, things were pretty hectic. We've already had 4 named storms for the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. Of course, we had Tropical Storm Alberto, Category 5 Hurricane Beryl, which was of course a Category 1 hurricane when it hit the Houston area. We briefly had Tropical Storm Chris, and as of this morning, we had another landfall with Category 1 Hurricane Debby. So that is 4 named storms. The next name on the list would be Ernesto, and we can't rule out that one developing over the next week. More on that a little bit later. But I want to show you a very interesting graphic because, like I just mentioned, we've had 4 named storms so far for the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. And guess what? All 4 of those storms have been Gulf Coast landfalls. The 2 that blew up and became hurricanes, of course, Hurricane Beryl that hit the Houston area, Hurricane Debby that hit the Big Bend of Florida this morning, made landfall in the U.S. right along the Gulf Coast. But the other 2 systems that were tropical storms, that would be Tropical Storm Alberto and Tropical Storm Chris. Well, those 2 made landfall in parts of Mexico. So they did some damage, but the 2 that did the major damage, of course, Hurricane Beryl and of course Hurricane Debby, which is now Tropical Storm Debby, still spreading a ton of rain to southeastern portions of the U.S. So it has been a very interesting hurricane season so far. All 4 of our named storms have been Gulf Coast landfalls. They pushed into the Gulf of Mexico and slammed into parts of the Gulf Coast. Let me show you what's going on with Debby right now. Of course, last night, this morning, it did blow up. It went through that rapid strengthening and it did become that Category 1 80-mile-per-hour hurricane, making landfall around the Big Bend of Florida. Now that it is interacting with land, it is starting to weaken just a little bit, but still not that weak. It is down to 50 miles per hour, but the forecast actually calls for it to move back out over water, likely briefly moving back out over the Atlantic Ocean, and that could strengthen it a little bit more. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But at this point, Debby is forecast to kind of sit over Georgia for much of Tuesday and then push out over the Atlantic as we go into Wednesday, and then Thursday kind of curve back around back towards the Carolinas, but it's not going to move very far over the next 2, 3, even 4 days. So that means a ton of rain likely for parts of Savannah, Georgia, and especially up around Charleston, South Carolina. You can see the swirl, that counterclockwise spin that we currently have with Tropical Storm Debby. The center of circulation starting to get close to Jacksonville, kind of in between Valdosta, Georgia, and Jacksonville, Florida. Notice also most of the rain with the system on the eastern side, or the dirty side. Folks in the the western portion of the Florida Panhandle really didn't pick up a ton of rain from this. So that would be over towards Panama City Beach and other locations, Pensacola, not really getting a whole lot. But a lot of the Florida Peninsula up towards Jacksonville, Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, Gainesville, Florida, definitely getting in on some of those rain bands associated with Debby. So Debby is projected to continue to push to the north and a little to the north and east over the next day or so, but that threat for heavy rain will stick around. We also still have a tornado watch for parts of Florida and Georgia, so a few tornadoes can't be ruled out as well. Let's talk about your 2-day rainfall totals. Debby has already dumped a ton of rain across parts of Florida, especially the Big Bend of Florida, over a foot of rain showing up in between Tallahassee and Gainesville, and just south of Tampa near Bradenton, Florida, close to 16 inches of rain showing up just over the last 2 days. That rain is still coming down for parts of Florida, and it's only going to get worse as we go into the rest of this week. In fact, I want to show you our flash flood risk for today, and it is that rare 4 out of 4 extremely high threat for flash flooding, stretching from Savannah down to the Gainesville area and over into Perry, Florida, Valdosta, Georgia, Waycross, Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia, all of these locations expecting the potential for over a foot of rain, maybe even isolated amounts of over 2 feet of rain, believe it or not, between now and Friday. As we go into tomorrow, that high risk for flash flooding will stick around. Some of the same spots being impacted, maybe shifting a little bit farther to the north into parts of North Carolina, but bottom line, it is just going to be a mess with round after round of heavy rain. Debby likely pulling in a lot of moisture, and that will mean heavy rainfall, big time rain totals as it just kind of slows down and just sits and parks itself over some of the same areas. So how much rain are we expecting? Well, this model shows rain that is forecast from today until Friday. And notice some of the biggest rain totals are expected right around portions of Georgia and also South Carolina. In fact, down around Savannah, Charleston, South Carolina, even up into portions of North Carolina, some of these spots could pick up over 15 inches of rain. There could be isolated amounts, like I said, over 2 feet. So this is certainly something that we are monitoring very closely. It looks like this will be a significant threat for Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina through much of the rest of the week. So if you have friends, family there, make sure to check on them. If you had travel plans there, plan on some significant delays potentially as we go through the week. Well, the good news for us here in Houston is that we did escape the wrath of Hurricane Debby. We had to deal with Hurricane Beryl last month, but we had no impacts from Debby. So what is next? What else is out there? Well, we're already tracking the next potential system. This is right around the Windward Islands, the eastern portion of the Caribbean Sea. And we have another tropical wave that is trying to get its act together here, and it is projected to push to the west. At this point, fairly disorganized showers and storms here, but it is moving over some very warm water, and conditions could become a little bit more favorable for this to develop. At this point, just a low chance for development over the next week or so, but notice the general track of this potential tropical system to the west-northwest, likely crossing over the Yucatan Peninsula later this week. And it is projected to go into the southern Gulf of Mexico once again. So if we get another system in the Gulf of Mexico, this would be the 5th system, likely the 5th named storm, and potentially the 5th landfall for one of these systems for the Gulf of Mexico. So we have been kind of unlucky so far this season with these systems rolling right into the Gulf of Mexico. We are hoping if this does happen, this one does stay away from Houston right now. There's a higher shot that it would go into Mexico over Houston, but of course we will keep you updated. As far as temperatures out there, they are super warm in the Gulf of Mexico, temps well into the 80s, those sea surface temps close to 90 degrees. So that warm water really helped Debby to strengthen from a tropical storm to a hurricane last night and this morning, and those same warm waters will help any other potential system that is able to creep into the Gulf of Mexico strengthen. So that is why we are monitoring things very closely. Here's something to keep in mind. We are only in the beginning of August, and we are now in usually the busiest portion of hurricane season, which is August and September. Even the first part of October, usually the first week or two, things can be pretty active and unsettled with the tropics. So we've got a long way to go. Yes, many of you likely still cleaning up, recovering from what's left after the wrath of Hurricane Beryl, but we still could be hit again. So you always need to make sure that you are prepared and that you're ready. Make sure you know your evacuation routes. Make sure you have your tools and supplies needed in case a tropical storm or hurricane heads back to Houston. And just make sure that you have your insurance papers protected just in case you get flooded or you get wind damage, so that you will be able to try to recover quickly after the storm. So that's what's shaking in the tropics. Fortunately, nothing heading towards Houston for now.